Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We take complex source material and, well, make it accessible.
Make it make sense.
Exactly. Today we're tackling Richard Feynman's 6 easy pieces, specifically his take on the basic rules of the physical world.
Right. The goal, as Feynman saw it, is understanding this incredibly complex world.
Like his seashore analogy.
The water, sand, wind, life, even thought.
It's just chaos, isn't it?
It really is.
And physics aims to boil all that down, to see it as the result of just a few basic things and forces interacting in countless ways.
It's about finding the structure underneath. Feynman had that great image. The universe is a giant chess game.
Played by the gods, yeah.
And we're just spectators. We don't know the rules initially, but we watch.
And by watching long enough, we start to figure them out.
Those rules are fundamental physics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We might never predict every single move. The game's too vast, too complicated for that.
Right.
But if we grasp the rules, well, then we can say we understand the world, at least in principle. Okay, so how do we figure out these rules? There's a method, right? Developed centuries ago.
Yeah, the scientific method. Observation, reason, experiment. You make guesses, you test them.
So you guess a rule for the cosmic chess game. How do you know if your guess is actually right? Feynman lays out, what, 3 ways?
3 main ways, yeah. The first one is finding a simple situation.
Like a quiet corner of the chessboard.
Precisely. Where nature simplifies itself enough that we can make exact predictions and test them rigorously.
That's the straightforward check. But the second way sounds more profound. Checking derivative rules.
It is. So instead of checking the main rule, say a bishop moves diagonally, you check a consequence.
Like if it starts on a red square, it should always be on a red square.
Right. And you check that maybe for years. It always holds. Until one day.
It's on a black square.
Boom. That's the key moment. That failure tells you your understanding is incomplete. There's a deeper rule you missed.
Like maybe the bishop was captured and then promoted to a queen off the board.
Something like that. Finding where the rules break is how we make real progress. It forces us to dig deeper.
I really like that perspective. Okay, and the third method.
The third is, well, it's about approximation, understanding the big picture.
Like seeing the general strategy in the chess game, even if you can't track every pawn.
Exactly. Maybe you see the players grouping pieces near the king. You get the gist defense even without knowing the precise reason for each move. We can often understand nature's overall behavior this way.
And this drive, this constant push to simplify and unify, Feynman calls it amalgamation.
Trying to see all of nature as just different facets of one single set of underlying phenomena.
And historically, physics has had huge successes with this.
Absolutely huge.
Like realizing heat is just atomic motion that links thermodynamics and mechanics.
Right. And the big one. Electricity, magnetism, and light, all just aspects of the electromagnetic field.
Incredible unification.
Then chemistry got pulled in, explained by quantum mechanics dealing with atoms.
But it's not a finished story, is it? Feynman says we're still in a messy state.
Yeah, it's always messy. We unify things, but then new discoveries pop up, like X-rays or weird new particles, new wires hanging out, as he puts it.
So the big question lingers. Is it a finite puzzle? Will we eventually find all the pieces?
Or does the game board just keep getting bigger the more we look? We honestly don't know.
Okay, let's park that existential question for a moment and look back. What did the puzzle look like before the big quantum shakeup, say around 1920?
Right, the classical view, the stage was pretty clear then.
3 dimensions of space, good old Euclidean space, and time was just time, separate, flowing along.
And on this stage, you had the actors. Particles, basically atoms, and they had inertia.
Meaning they resist changes in motion.
Correct. And you have forces acting between them. These were sort of split into 2 types.
Right.
There were these really complicated short-range forces, the ones holding atoms together and molecules, you know, chemistry.
The messy stuff.
The messy stuff. And then there was this beautiful, simple, long-range force, gravity.
Newton's inverse square law.
Yes.
Elegant, smooth attraction between everything.
Yep. And this classical picture, just particles and forces, was actually pretty powerful. It could explain a lot of that seashore complexity we started with.
How so?
Well, pressure. That's just countless atoms banging against a surface.
Makes sense.
Wind. That's just the collective drift, the average motion of air particles in one direction.
Yep.
Heat. That's the random internal jiggling energy of the particles. More jiggling, more heat.
Right. And sound.
Sound waves are just bunches of particles, areas of slightly higher density moving through the medium. It all seemed to fit.
But there was a problem, wasn't there?
Huh.
Gravity is way too weak to hold atoms together tightly.
Way too weak. You needed something much stronger for the short-range stuff, the glue holding matter together.
Enter the electrical force.
Exactly. And this was different. Crucially, Dost, it wasn't just attraction. It had two types of charge.
Positive and negative.
Right. And the rule was, likes repel, unlikes attract. And the strength. Just mind-boggling compared to gravity.
But this is that calculation that always blows my mind. The 2 grains of sand.
Yeah, Feynman's example. Tiny grains, 30 meters apart. If you could somehow turn off the repulsion, make all the charges attract like gravity.
The force between them would be 3 million tons.
3 million tons. It's astronomical, which tells you something fundamental.
That in normal matter, the positive and negative charges must be almost perfectly balanced.
Exactly. They cancel each other out incredibly precisely. That's why stuff seems neutral. But scrape off just a tiny fraction of electrons, like rubbing a balloon on your hair.
And you see static electricity. You unleash a tiny bit of that immense force.
And this huge force differential dictates the basic structure of the atom.
A tiny, dense, heavy nucleus in the center, positively charged.
Made of protons and neutrons.
Surrounded by these light, nimble, negatively charged electrons orbiting somehow.
And the key for chemistry is simply the number of those electrons. That determines almost all the elements' properties.
Okay, but then there was another refinement needed. The idea of charge A instantly pulling on charge B across empty space. That felt wrong.
It caused problems, especially when things started moving. If you wiggle charge A, does charge B feel it instantly, even far away?
Doesn't seem right. There should be a delay.
There is a delay, and that led to the concept of the electric field.
So a charge doesn't pull directly. It does something to the space around it.
Yes. Rule A charges create a condition or a distortion in space that's the field. Rule B. Other charges in that field feel a force because of the field at their location.
And the field takes time to propagate. If I wiggle charge A, the field changes near it, and that change ripples outwards.
Like dropping a pebble in a pond. The ripple takes time to reach the edge. This field concept is essential to explain that delay we observe.
Feynman uses another analogy here, right? With corks in water.
He does. If two corks are really close, pushing one seems to move the other instantly. Looks like direct action.
Okay.
But if they're far apart and you jiggle one cork,
You make waves.
you make waves in the water, and eventually those waves reach the other cork and make it jiggle.
So the water is the field.
The water is the medium, the field. And the jiggling creates waves. The field isn't static, it can carry disturbances.
And those disturbances, those waves in the electromagnetic field, that's light. Radio waves.
All of it. Light, radio, TV signals, X-rays, they're all fundamentally the same thing. Waves propagating through the electromagnetic field.
Just like different notes or different vibrations of air.
Exactly. The only physical difference is the frequency of oscillation, how fast the field is vibrating.
So low frequency, like household AC current, maybe 100 cycles per second.
Radio waves are higher, kilocycles or megacycles.
Then visible light is way up there.
Way up, around 5 times 10 to the 14 cycles per second. That tiny sliver of frequencies our eyes happen to detect. Red is lower frequency, violet is higher.
And even higher frequencies.
That's where you get X-rays and then gamma rays. They're just very, very high frequency forms of light, essentially.
Okay, so that's the classical picture, refined with fields and waves. But then came the revolution, around 1920 onwards.
The quantum revolution. And it didn't just change the actors, it changed the stage itself.
Space and time weren't separate anymore. Einstein fused them into space-time.
And even more drastically, Newton's laws of motion, the very bedrock of classical physics, turned out to be just plain wrong at the atomic scale.
Things got weird down there.
Very weird. Fundamentally non-classical, counterintuitive, hard to visualize.
And a central piece of this weirdness is the uncertainty principle.
Heisenberg's principle, yeah.
Yeah.
It basically says the classical idea that a particle has simultaneously a precise position and a precise momentum or speed, that's wrong.
You can't know both perfectly. The more precisely you pin down its location.
The less precisely you can know its momentum and vice versa. There's a fundamental limit to the combined certainty.
And this isn't just about our measurement limitations, where it's fundamental to nature.
It seems to be. And it has profound consequences. It actually explains why atoms aren't tiny, why electrons don't just spiral into the nucleus.
How does that work?
Well, if an electron did fall right into the tiny nucleus, we'd know its position very precisely.
Okay.
But the uncertainty principle says that means its momentum must become incredibly uncertain, potentially huge.
Ah, so it would have a huge kinetic energy.
Enough energy to force it away from the nucleus. It can't stay put. The electron has to compromise, existing in a fuzzy region, constantly jiggling.
Even at absolute zero.
Even at absolute zero, there's this inherent quantum jiggle, the zero-point energy, forced by uncertainty.
Which leads to another, maybe more philosophical, upheaval. Probability.
Yes. Classical physics was deterministic. Know the state now, predict the future exactly. Quantum mechanics says, nope.
You can only predict probabilities. Like you can calculate the probability that this specific atom will emit a light particle, a photon, in the next microsecond.
But you can never predict the exact moment it will happen. Nature, at its core, seems to play dice.
And Feynman stresses you can't just assume there's some hidden mechanism determining it that we just haven't found yet.
Right. The theory suggests it's fundamentally probabilistic, and the only test is experiment. Does the theory match what we observe?
Which connects back to his point about experiment being the sole judge. He mentions that idea that experiments should be perfectly repeatable everywhere.
Yeah, the old philosophical idea, if you do it in Stockholm, you should get the same result in Quito.
But nature doesn't always work like that.
Nope. You don't see the aurora australis in Quito just because you saw the aurora borealis in Stockholm. The conditions matter. Our laws have to reflect what nature actually does, not what we think it should do.
Okay, back to the rules. Quantum mechanics also brought another huge unification, didn't it? Between waves and particles.
The wave-particle duality.
Yeah.
It turns out everything electrons, photons, atoms exhibits both wave-like and particle-like behavior.
It just depends on the situation or the frequency.
Frequency plays a big role. Low-frequency phenomena, the wave aspect tends to dominate our observations. High frequency, the particle aspect becomes more obvious.
So for electromagnetism, this duality meant adding a particle.
The photon, the particle or quantum of the electromagnetic field.
And putting quantum mechanics together with the electromagnetic field in the photon gives us
Quantum Electrodynamics, QED.
And Feynman calls this basically our greatest success.
Arguably, yes. QED is incredibly precise. It describes all ordinary phenomena outside the nucleus.
Like everything, chemistry, biology.
In principle, yes. The interactions of atoms and light, which govern chemistry, material properties, density, the color of things, how transistors work, it's all QED.
Wow.
And it only needs a couple of inputs, fundamentally the mass and the charge of the electron. From that, you can, in theory, calculate almost everything else about ordinary matter.
That's astonishing. And QED even predicted new things.
It did. It predicted the existence of antimatter, specifically the positron, the electron's antiparticle. Same mass, opposite charge. And it was found.
So QED reigns supreme outside the nucleus.
Outside the nucleus, it's king. But the moment you look inside that tiny, dense core,
things get messy again. Really messy.
The forces in there are enormous. We're talking nuclear bomb energies compared to chemical reactions like TNT. Totally different scale.
And just like electromagnetism needed a particle, the photon.
Yukawa proposed that these strong nuclear forces must also have mediating particles. He predicted the pion.
Which was eventually found, right? After some confusion with a muon.
Right, so the basic idea seemed correct, but developing the full theory quantum nucleodynamics, you might call it, proved incredibly difficult.
Too complex to calculate.
For decades, yes. The interactions are just too strong, the math gets intractable, and while theorists struggled...
experimenters were finding more and more particles. The particle zoo?
Exactly. Not just protons, neutrons, electrons, photons, pions, but dozens more. Lambdas, sigmas, k-mesons. It got crowded.
How did physicists even start to organize that?
With classification schemes, like sorting newly discovered species. Gell-Mann and Nishijima came up with a system based on conserved quantum numbers.
Including a new one they called strangeness?
Yeah. It helped explain why some of these new particles lived longer than expected before decaying. They possess this strangeness property that had to be conserved in fast, strong interactions, but not in the slower, weak interactions.
Like finding a new column needed in the periodic table.
Kind of like that, yeah. A way to impose some order on the chaos.
So broadly speaking, how do these zoo animals group together now, based on Feynman's tables?
You have three main families. First, the heavyweights, the baryons. Protons, neutrons, and these heavier, strange particles like lambda and sigma, they all feel the strong nuclear force.
Okay, heavy ones. So
the middle weights, the mesons, like the pion and the k-meson. They also interact strongly and are often involved in mediating forces between baryons.
and the lightweight.
The leptons. These guys don't feel the strong nuclear force. This group includes the familiar electron.
And the neutrino, which is massless, or nearly so.
Right. And then there's the oddball, the muon.
The muon, the heavy electron.
Yeah, 206 times heavier than the electron, but otherwise identical in its interactions. As Feynman famously asked who ordered that, its purpose is still a complete mystery.
A loose thread, if ever there was one.
Mm.
And we also have particles with zero mass and zero charge.
The photon, carrier of electromagnetism, and theoretically the graviton, carrier of gravity, though it hasn't been detected.
Okay, so we have the zoo of particles. How many fundamental ways do they actually interact? Is it just as messy?
Surprisingly, no. Despite the particle zoo, we currently only know of 4 fundamental forces or interactions.
4. What are they in order of strength?
Number 1, the strongest, is the strong interaction, the nuclear force holding nuclei together. Its fundamental law is still unknown, though we know some rules it follows, like conserving baryon number.
Okay, strong force. Number 2.
The electrical interaction, or electromagnetism, much weaker, about 1137th the strength of the strong force, but its law is known beautifully, QED.
Right. Number 3.
The weak interaction, responsible for processes like beta-decay in radioactivity. It's much weaker still, and its law is only partly understood, or was at the time Feynman wrote this. We know more now, but it's complex.
And finally, the weakest by far.
Gravity, astronomically weaker than the others at the particle level. Its law, general relativity, is known, but how it fits with quantum mechanics is the biggest unsolved problem in fundamental physics.
So that's the picture. Feynman calls it the horrible condition of our physics today.
Well, horrible in the sense of incomplete. Outside the nucleus, QED is triumphant. We basically know the rules.
But inside the nucleus.
Inside, we know quantum mechanics applies, but we have the zoo of particles, and we don't know the fundamental law of the strong force that governs their most powerful interactions. We don't see the underlying connections yet.
So to wrap up this deep dive into Feynman's view, we've seen this progression.
Yeah, 3 big shifts, really. First, moving from just observing complex nature to seeking simple underlying rules, the chess game idea.
Then replacing the simple idea of direct forces with the concept of fields carrying those forces in waves.
Right. And finally, the quantum leap. Realizing the microscopic world doesn't play by classical rules. Its probabilistic wave-particle duality reigns, and uncertainty is fundamental.
And we're left back at the cosmic chess game. We've figured out many rules, QED for electromagnetism, gravity's law. But the rules for the strong force were made elusive, and we don't even know if we found all the pieces on the board.
Or if the board even has edges.
So the final thought to leave everyone with.
Well, think about QED, its incredible success explaining almost all of chemistry and materials science from just the electron's mass and charge. It hints at an underlying simplicity.
So the provocative thought is,
if we could just crack the code of the strong interaction, understand the rules inside the nucleus, maybe a similar profound simplicity is waiting there too. What elegant principle might unify that whole particle zoo? That's the quest.